Hey, I'm Brad with EcoSpeed, and we're going to show you how simple it is to install the Mountain Drive 1. Cool. So first we got to take off the crankset here. That's fairly simple. You're going to need an 8mm on this one. Well, let's take the pedals off first while it's on the bike. So the pedals are right-hand threaded on the right side of the bike, but left-handed on the left. If that makes any sense. It's just the way it is. Alright, pedals off. Now it's time to take off the cranks. It's easier if you put it in the first gear on the crank, or take it off. I'm going to use this crank puller tool here. Got to get it lined up with the threads. There it is. You want to make sure that those threads get all the way engaged before you start cranking on this piece. There we go. So it tracks the tension fit. Comes right off. That guy. Alright, now it's time to do the bottom bracket cartridge here. We'll use splined cartridge removal and installation tool. Put in there. Use your big wrench. And this is also left hand on one side and right on the other. This side, the left side of the bike, will be right hand thread, so it would be lefty-loosey. Just pull that guy out there. It's already a little loose. You want to take the cup off on the left side before you take the cartridge out of the right. So this is going to be a cup here. Just like that. So this will be righty-loosey on the right side. Another way to think about it is that it comes loose towards the front of the bike. There it comes. That's your bottom bracket cartridge. Alright, now we're going to put the mid-drive on here. So this is a crank drive, so it needs to be under the down tube of the bike. We have our bottom bracket shell cleared of the original bottom bracket. This is going to go on either side. I'm going to go ahead though and do an install trick where I take this collar off first, and we'll put the bottom bracket in and then reinstall this guy. Okay, so that's prepared. And we're going to put the bottom bracket in. This is a fill wood bottom bracket. It's beautiful. It's a little longer on one side than the other. Make sure that the fill would read, if you were sitting on the bike, you should be able to read it. So it'll go this way. The fill facing, being read from this direction. That puts the longer end on the drive side. We got these custom cups made for our system. The lock rings will hold the motor on either side. You'll see that there's one that's marked with red. That's going to be your drive side cup, which will go on the long end of the spindle, and the longer one will be your non-drive side cup. So we're ready to put those on. You should have a proprietary fill wood tool with your kit. And I'm going to just hit it with a little bit of grease into the bottom bracket shell here. Remember that the cups go in towards the back of the bike on either side, so on the non-drive side it'll be righty-tighty. Just get it started there. Put in the cartridge. And the drive side will be lefty-tighty. Want to be careful so you don't get anything cross-threaded when you do this. Sometimes it helps to move it in the direction of loosening it until you feel the thread engaged and then start tightening. Tool going here. We're just going to get it started in here. And go look at the other side. You can actually see on the inside where the splines are, and you're going to want them to come all the way down onto the bearing before it's tight. You'll feel some pressure in it when you do this. Okay, it's tight on that side. Let's check this one. It's tight on this side. Okay, there'll be some adjustability in here for getting it lined up as we go. But now, go ahead and slide this over. Collar on that side. And we're going to have to reinstall the collar on this one. Oh, let's put the band on first. So you see, this mounting bracket can slide up and down the system to wherever it fits best. In this case, we got integrated cables coming out of the frame, so I got it to the farthest extent that it can go. You can set up the angle. And we're going to put a band clamp in here to hold it tight against the frame. Feed the tail in. Use your flathead screwdriver. Started. So, while there's still room between the bike frame and the clamp, I'll take a piece of this, take another piece of this, slide them in, and then keep clamping it. Don't bring it all the way tight yet, because we're going to still have to finish our brackets. Go ahead and put in first bolt here. And it's going to be a little bit of a reach to get these back on. The washer goes first, lock washer second. So I'm going to use some needle nose here. See if we can make that fit. Get the cable out of the way there. Alright, so now we're going to tighten this guy up. There's only one way to get the wrench in there just so it'll fit, which is right up through here. Alright, now that we got the collar back on, we need to tighten both bolts. This one's a little hard to reach. You got to come in from this angle, work it around the cords there, and then you get your purchase on the nut. Alright, this one's a lot easier because it's right there. Okay, so what we got is this is a little loose up here. We got our collars on either side of the bottom bracket shell. The collar is tight with its 2 bolts. And this is time to see where we've lined up our cups, because they can move left and right a little bit. On the drive side, we're going to use this lock ring made by Philwood. You see how thick it is. You want to have a little bit of thread sticking out from it after you put it on there. And this is a left-hand thread, so it's lefty-tighty. Don't cinch it all the way yet. Then go to the other side with this guy. This one's righty-tighty. Uses a green Park Tool pin spanner. Alright, that's looking good. Okay, so we want to give our final tightening on this bottom bracket now before we cinch those down. we want to see that this spline is all the way butted up against the bearing, the outer ring.
Boy,
so when you
sure
see that,
the definition, but maybe
you can see it in person.
okay.
So you want to make sure that those are seated on both sides. So we'll give a final crank. Awesome. So that's seated well. You're going to want to make sure that the top of the band isn't covering your water bottle hole there, which this one seems to be doing. But you also want to make sure that the bracket on the bottom isn't pinching anything either. This one's real close to the internal routing of those cables, so we don't have a lot of choice about where we can put it. You see that this slides up and down on that arc there, so let's slide it up as far as we can. Alright, so we've moved the bracket as far forward as possible to make that miss the top of the water bottle mount. And let's tighten this band clamp down before we tighten these lock rings. And then we can flip these over. Blends in really nicely.
Good.
Okay, you're going to want an 8mm socket for that guy. So we're going to tighten down this bracket now that we've got it in place. That's it. Alright, so we got that top clamp on. Now it's time to do these lock rings on either side of the bottom bracket. Start with the right side. There we go.
Okay.
Alright, so that was with the standard lock ring wrench for a bike. And there it is. Now, all the force of the motor pulling on the crank is going to be a left-right force, but since we got bracket on either side of that, it's really cinched down. The third point is just to keep it braced in case you get a jolt, hit a rock or something, if you're out mountain biking or anything else. It's just going to hold it there. So, and the nice adjustable clamp lets us put it anywhere we need to.
It's good.
Bam! This is a good example of a bike that needed the adjustability of the clamp. So we're missing those internal cable pieces. There's one here, and there's two of them in there, and we're golden. All right, now it's time to put the crank on the bike. First, we got to take off this chain guard. Just 3 little bolts here. And here you can see spring-loaded motor chain tensioner. And here's the one-way roller clutch that the chain's going to go onto. The crank set is going to fit up onto here. But on this bike, the gearing was so low that we're going to have to move the derailleur first. So let's go ahead and do that. It just takes a 5mm. That. And then we'll deal with positioning it after we got the crank on. 8mm crank bolt on. Give it a little grease first here. So when it starts getting tight, that's when the press fit is happening between the outer edges of the hole in the crank arm and the square taper spindle that's in the bottom bracket. Once you get to that tight spot, just cinch it down a little bit more and you're on. Alright, so I missed something here. Before you put the crankset on, you probably want to put your bike chain on there. Luckily enough, there's enough room. Position the crank like so. Pull out that extra little bit. So we got that guy on there. The crank set's tight. It's time for the motor chain. So you see that in here this sprocket wants to move one way but not the other. You can't push it back. So go ahead and feed this through by engaging it into the teeth and then rotating it forward until it comes out the bottom side. There, we got it out the bottom side. So just go around the outer chain ring here, and we can use our small Allen key to move this spring-loaded tensioner out of the way. We'll kind of stick something in there so it's not bothering us. But with the help of the crank, we can turn that whole thing around so we get the two ends closer. Get this guy out of the way there. So now we got that. We're going to use a needle nose. So this master link has a little clip on the end. Push that off with your pliers. Comes right out. Then there's an extra little plate. Comes off. Grab your two ends. Slide the master link in from the back side. Put the plate on there. Make sure it's on tight. And then the C-clip, you'll see that it has an open end on one side and a closed end on the other. You want the closed end to always be moving in the clockwise direction so that as it comes through the gearbox and back out, if it came into contact with anything, it's not going to undo itself. If you did it going backwards and it hit something, it could come off. So we'll just place that on there. And you hear that audible click when it fits into its groove. Make sure that it is in there well. Don't want that coming undone. And there it is. So we'll undo our spring tensioner here. Fit the teeth. And we lifted the rear wheel off the ground. Now we're halfway there. Look at that. So now that we got the crank on there with the motor chain, we want to adjust that derailleur. So that will be with number 5 right here. Go ahead and bring it on down. You want to make it so that when this moves forward, it misses these teeth by like 1 to 3 millimeters. So as close as possible. You'll also notice that some places are further away from the teeth than others. Make sure you use the closest one to gauge. And I'd say that right about there is good. So let's hold it in place there. Make sure that it's aligned with the left and right. And this is something you may need to revisit when you get it on the ground and start riding it. You notice tightening it up. Now when you bring it over, it's a lot higher. So there's a little bit to play with. That's better. Better. So we'll tighten it down there, but we're not going to play with the gears until we have everything else going. So next is the left-hand crank arm. Again, put a little grease on the crank bolt there. Notice that this is turned down a little bit to fit into that recess if it has to, but it shouldn't really come that close. Just about like that. Alright, so we're going to put the guard back on this guy. Cover up this chain. Slips right in there. Now it's time to put the Velociraptor on this guy. We're going to put him right here using this red bracket. So, first we got to put the bracket onto the bike. Otherwise, can reach the bolt heads. So, the lock washer goes under the head of the bolt washer, under that, and the whole thing right onto here. Alright, next up, is actually putting this controller on there. We're going to go to the other side. So there's 3 bolts on the back of this guy. Well, there's 5 on the back of this guy, but we're going to take off 3. Correspond with the holes in the bracket. Alrighty. Slide it on there. I might have to press these wires down a little bit. Bam. Alright, so what are we going to do with all these wires? It's like everybody's going to be different at this point too. But it looks like we could either run them down through here or maybe try and run them down through there. I'm going to vote for coming down here. Let's just give it a look. Yeah. See, there's a bunch of little ends, and these are not going to go to anything. This is for programming or for putting cadence sensors in there, speed sensors, or a brake cutoff switch. So you may be using them or may not, depending on what build you're going to be doing. This is going to go up to the battery. So since the battery on this case is going to be in the rear rack, just put it there. This one goes down to the motor. Starting to look good. May have to put a tie around these to keep them in place. You can see from the motor we have these 2 leads, and now from the controller we have these 2 leads. And then this one right here, this is the throttle. So the throttle is probably going to come down right into here. We'll just leave this sticking out. Just pop it right there for now. This connects to this guy. This connects to this guy. And we'll figure that out as we go. Alright, now it's time to put the throttle on here. We're going to take all these guys off and put this one on. Alright, so now we got the throttle on there with the shifters and everything back in. You want to put it in a position where when a rider's on there and sitting up straight, their thumb will not feel awkward to have it in full throttle. Alright, now that we got the throttle, the battery, and the mid-drive plus controller all hooked up, it's time to make something nice out of this mess of wires we found ourselves with. So we're going to have to run the throttle wire up down here to this area, and we got the power cord situated, but we're going to have to clean it up, so we'll see how that looks. Hey, so now that we got this bundle of wires here, we want to make them disappear. So this is what this stretch wire cozy is for. Not sure what else to call it. We do want to make sure though that these sensor wires stay separate from the phase wires. The magnetic forces coming off the phase wires can interrupt signals. So it's not a super big concern. You don't got to put them on opposite ends of the bike, but I'm not going to wrap them in the same covering. Seal that on right there. And that's just going to tie right up in there. Look at that.
Good.
Just disappeared. Yep. Alright, so here's the sensor wires that we wanted to keep separate. And, you know, I think it's going to work good just to kind of double it back on itself. Slide it up in there a little bit. And then tie it right on this piece. That way it's not bundled together with the others, but they're still disappearing underneath the frame there. Super easy, Super clean. Nobody will even know they're there. Alright, so we got the throttle mounted right up here. See, the wire comes down. Cabled it onto the existing cables right here. So there it is. Joins up. Comes down under the down tube. Anchored it on the band clamp with a zip tie. Behind it with a zip tie to the frame. And then it goes down into the frame where it comes into the bundle here. We got all our gray wires. Some of them are little nubby ends like that. Just kind of tucked away. Another nub right here tucked away so it looks like one smooth cable. Yeah, there's phase wires. Power wire comes right up on the seat tube, anchored beneath the seat tube so it can come undone right there and redone without much effort. On this one we just put the battery directly onto the rear rack, sans cradle, and just took up the slack with that wire around the seat. There it is. Alright, so after we got the chain and the crank on, we need to adjust the left-right position of this motor chain. So we do that by moving the whole motor to the left or right using these bolts and set screws that are on all four corners. You can see those guys right there. So the set screws, we can loosen them for adjustment by loosening the bolts on all four corners and then moving the screws in or out. With these front two, you can do that with the wrench. The back two have an access hole behind them. So you see right here, you got to use a nice long extender, but you can get in there with it. There we go. So now everything's loose here. We want to look at this position right there. Can you lift it up here so we can see? We want the chain to be even between the outer guard and the inner guard. See, it's pretty close to perfect right where it is. But we definitely want to dial that in, and you look at the bottom too to adjust that. So I think it needs to come out just a little bit, so I'm going to move the set screw just like that. And just to make sure that it's really lining up where it's going to be, I'll tighten it down with the bolt. It's paired to the set screw. Yeah, and that looks perfect. When you tighten down the bolt, you don't want to put too much pressure on it. It's an aluminum plate and it'll bend a little bit. Once you start seeing it bend, just let it be. There's enough tension there to hold it in place, no problem. So once you get your first position lined up, you can make the rest match it pretty much. So, but in case you do need more adjustment, all four corners can be in different spots. So it's a very adjustable system here. So, you definitely need to use the ball end of your Allen key to reach into that socket. Good thing all the tightening is done with the wrench or the driver. Alright, now on this side, I'll just bring it out to match the front two, see how that looks. It's 3. So that pretty much tightened it up right there, but I'll put a little bit more pressure on it just to make sure. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yep. There it is. So now we see that our chain is totally in line. It's not going to be scraping on the inside of either of those guards. So just kind of check it real good. Once you go out and test ride it, you might find that things change when there's load on it. It's really easy to adjust. It's 4 screws. So we'll put the top back on it, and that's it.